off a couple weeks ago, which now seems like forever. I forgot this is really kind of the first Wednesday that I've been here this month. We had a funeral and then out of town. So 1 Samuel chapter number 9. Who remembers what we talked about before that in chapter number 8? An important chapter in this book. Yeah. Yeah, they're desiring a king. And why did they want a king? Everybody else has it, right? Got to keep up with the Joneses. So they're desiring to have a king like all the other nations around them so they can be like all the other nations, so that he will go out before them and fight their battles. And they really seem to think that this earthly king is going to solve all of their problems for them. So God gives them a warning there in the middle of the chapter, right? That if you do this, I will allow it. But if you do it, he's going to essentially draft all your men into service. He's going to take your fields. He's going to tax you. He's going to basically do whatever he wants unrestrained, and life is not going to be better. You know, the grass is not always greener on the other side, as we like to think. And so he gives them this charge, this warning, and what do they decide at the end after that? Still want it. So he gives in to them, says, okay, you wanted that, I'll allow it. But remember, I warned you. And what there's kind of a very kind of ominous statement that he makes there in chapter 8 about that. What does he say? He tells them that there will come that time when they'll regret it. And in that time, what won't he do? He won't listen. Now that seems harsh. That seems mean and cruel. But what is God trying to tell them? Okay. He's going to allow them to do what? Okay, yeah. Yeah, to feel the consequences of their actions. That our choices, our decisions we make, they do have real consequences. And he is going to allow the nation of Israel as a whole to feel the consequence of rejecting God alone as their king. And in so doing, when that day comes, he'll hear their pain, he'll know, but he's going to remind them, I told you not to do this, but you chose to anyways. And now, this is what you get. If you have kids, I'm sure you've been there. I tell my kids all the time, especially when Liam does something that I just told him not to do and he falls and hurts himself, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's something I was told in the military all the time. And that's what happens. You choose to do something stupid, don't expect a good outcome. You choose to do something that's rebellious, don't expect to be rewarded for it. Yet we continually think, I can just do whatever I want, and then whenever I need God, I'll go back to God, and he'll just, bless me and take care of me, because that's what he has to do. Well, not so, is it? We're told that if we follow God with a clear heart, clear conscience, to be holy as he is holy, then yes, we do get blessings, we do get rewards, and God is very gracious to us even when we are rebellious, that God allows us to be spared from a lot of the harm that we would do or cause ourselves. But there is a time when God will allow us to feel the consequences of our actions as punishment for our sin. And in those times, when we call out to God and we say, why are you allowing this to happen? You'll be surprised when he says, you chose this. We talk about that when we discipline our kids. The reason you're getting this discipline is because you chose this. You chose to rebel, you chose to be disobedient, and you know that there's a punishment for disobedience. This is what you earned for your disobedience. If you were obedient, you'd get ice cream or whatever. Greatest thing about vacation, having ice cream at 10:30 in the morning and not feeling guilty. Till I got back. And then realized, oh boy, I need to get back in shape. Having ice cream at 10:30 and then later again in the afternoon, because Layla is a daughter after my own heart. All she wanted was ice cream the whole time. But we are going to feel those consequences sometimes, and he's going to allow us. So 1 Samuel chapter number 9 is where we pick up as we left off there. And Samuel sends them away because God is going to give them what they desire. So he sends every man away back to their city so that they can eventually get this king set up. So 1 Samuel chapter number 9, we're going to read the first 10 verses to start. It says, there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiah, a Benjaminite, a man of wealth. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. So Kish said to Saul, his son, "Take one of the young men with you, and rise and go look for the donkeys." And he passed through the hill country of Ephraim, and passed through the land of Shalashash. Oh my goodness, these names. But they did not find them. And they passed through the land of Shalem, but they were not there. Then they passed through the land of Benjamin, but did not find them. When they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, "Come, let us go back, lest my father cease to care about the donkeys and become anxious about us." But he said to him, "Behold, there is a man of God in this city, and he is a man who is held in honor. All that he says comes true. So now let us go there. Perhaps he can tell us the way we should go." Then Saul said to his servant, "But if we go, what can we bring this man? For the bread in our sacks is gone, and there is no present to bring to the man of God. What do we have?" The servant answered Saul again, "Here I have with me a quarter of a shekel of silver, and I will give it to the man of God to tell us our way. Formerly in Israel, that when a man went to inquire of God, he said, 'Come, let us go to the seer,' for today's prophet was formerly called a seer." And Saul said to his servant, "Well said. Come, let us go." So they went to the city where the man of God was. Now that's a lot to unpack in those 10 verses right there as we will go through this whole chapter. But right away we're introduced to who? To Saul and his family. In the first 2 verses we get to learn a few things about Saul. What are some things that we see about him in those first 2 verses? Okay, of course the lady said he was handsome. And tall. And tall, that's an important one. He's tall. Huh?
And probably dark.
Probably. That's a good one. All right, what else do we see? Mike, I missed you. What else do we see about him? Wealthy. Yeah, it comes from a wealthy family, right? So he is essentially, he's wealthy, he's handsome, he's taller than anybody. He is essentially what we would look for in a king, right? Earthly speaking, outward appearance, this is exactly what we would expect a king to look like, exactly what we'd look for. As we come into this time of the year and we head into Christmas, first off, if you're already listening to crazy, Christmas music, I know you're crazy and a psycho. There's a time and place for that, and it's after Thanksgiving. But the ones that listen to it beforehand are the ones that'll stab you with a smile on their face, and I know that. So I'm very cautious. Shasta wanted to go ahead and put up the stuff before we left for vacation. I was like, no. So she won a little bit. We got some up. We got a Christmas tree and some other things. We compromised. But it's that time of year when all the same Hallmark movies and Lifetime movies are on the TV. They have the same plot, half the time have the same actors with a different name. And what is it? It's always the same prince who falls in love with this girl that he shouldn't be with. And then there's a big trouble. They can't be together. And somehow at the end, they miraculously come together. I don't know how many of those I've had to sit through at this time of year. It's the one thing I dread. But this is exactly what Saul looked like. And I just picture he's one of those people in these Hallmark movies, right? That he is, that's it. He walks in and there's the prince right there, right? There's the king. He's exactly what they expected him to look for. An author made an interesting point here. He said, Saul is the only Israelite specifically noted in the Bible as being tall. Elsewhere, it was only Israel's enemies whose height was noted in some scripture references. But Israel had asked for a king like all the other nations. And the Lord was giving them the desires of their heart, even down to the physical details. So what they asked for is to be like all the other nations, and that's exactly what they're going to get. Because as we're about to start to see in Saul's character in these next few verses, it sets up a pattern for his life and a pattern of who he is, and he is very much so like the secular, wicked, pagan nations around him, far more than he is like an Israelite, a true follower of God. Look at with me in verse number 3, because even Saul's very name is reflective of Israel's heart. Saul's name literally means asked for or requested. It's kind of a constant, ironic reminder of Israel's sin in rejecting God as their king and asking for an earthly king. His very name is a constant reminder of their sin. God has a funny way of doing these things. He gives us constant reminders of our rejection of him. But verse number 3, we see the problem, right? These donkeys get out. They need to be found. And so Saul's father sends him and one of the servants to go find them, right? They're a man of wealth. They have donkeys. They need these. These are absolutely important and vital to their livelihood. So they decide that they're going to go and look for him. And what seems now might be a bit of an inconvenience both to Kish and to Saul is actually God's providential hand working all this together for his specific purpose. Now, we may miss that sometimes even in our own life, that God orchestrates some things somehow where we don't even understand what God is fully working out. I'll give you 4 instances. We came down here in February on vacation, and we met a guy who was a realtor in the area. We said, oh, okay, well, that's cool. We left, and we went back to Pennsylvania. 3 months later, I'm calling him and saying, hey, so you want to help us find a house? We're moving there. We had no idea why we met this guy. We had no idea why we were even considering that, right? We had no idea that this is where God was leading us, and yet here it is, right? God's hand at work behind the scenes in ways that we don't even know, and that's going to happen with Saul. He's going to orchestrate this whole meeting with Samuel that seems like a chance, seems like coincidence with him, but it's God's hand at work to go ahead and answer their prayer and do so in his way specifically. But before we get to that, in verse number 5, we start to learn a few things about Saul. There are 4 things specifically I want us to see about him. But first, in verse number 5, he said they've gone at least 3 days, as we'll find out in a little bit. They've gone at least 3 days looking for these donkeys. They haven't found them. They've traveled probably some 20 miles, maybe more, depending on what you look at and how you measure it out. But they've gone a decent distance. They've looked all over the place for these donkeys. Saul says to his servant there in the middle of verse number 5, he says, come, let us go back, lest my father cease to care about the donkeys and become anxious about us. We learn just a little bit later that they're out of bread too, right? That they have no bread, they have no more food. And so while this seems to be originally a good desire by Saul, like, okay, my dad's going to be more worried about us than these donkeys, so let's go back so he knows we're okay. What Saul's really doing is what he's going to do much later on in life. He's going to give up when things get tough. That he was given a specific task, he was given a specific thing to do to go find these donkeys that are important to their wealth, their livelihood, and bring them back to his father. He gets to the point where, you know what, I've looked enough, I'm good, we're just going to go back. We're out of food, we're out of all this stuff, let's just go back. It's tough, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm done. I'm tired of looking for these stupid animals, I'm going to go home. He doesn't consider any other possibility. He doesn't consider even trying to work a little bit harder to find them. He doesn't consider a specific solution that we'll see here in just a second. The only thing that he thinks of is himself. And I've done enough, I'm going to go home. It's gotten tough, I'm going to quit. Think about all the many instances later on in Saul's life. Goliath, the reason David was there is because Saul didn't want to face it. There's enemies around him, and Saul, instead of waiting on Samuel to come and do the sacrifice, Saul takes it on himself and just says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the sacrifice and be completely disobedient. Anytime things got tough and he got scared, he quit, stopped worrying about doing what was right, and did whatever was easy and convenient for him and advantageous in his own life. Something that we've learned about him already. Saul was also ignorant of who Samuel is. Verse number 6, his servant says, well, hold on, wait a second. There's a man of God in this city that we're in. Now, the city that Saul lived in Gibeah was very close to Ramah, or where Samuel's headquarters were, where his hometown was. Not to mention, a few chapters earlier, multiple times, the Bible tells us that all Israel knew who Samuel was. Who is Samuel at this point? He's a prophet. What else is he acting as? Nope. Judge. Yeah. And he did kind of serve some of the priestly function too. So that's, but right now, primarily, he's serving as both a prophet and a judge. All right, so he's speaking to the nation of Israel on God's behalf, and he's judging them. So everybody kind of knew who Samuel was. He's kind of the de facto leader here on earth of them right now as they transition from the judges to the kingship. Yet Saul seems to be completely ignorant of who he is. Shows that Saul apparently had no desire to know anything about the spiritual state of Israel. Apparently, he didn't have any desire or care to really know anything about God and what God was saying because he doesn't even know who God's spokesman is to them. Doesn't even know who's giving them a prophetic message, that he doesn't even have the time to sit back and care of that. Look at verse number 6. He said, but he said to him, behold, there's a man of God in this city, and he is a man who is held in honor. All that he says comes true, so now let us go there. Perhaps he can tell us the way we should go. Saul said to his servant, but if we go, what can we bring the man? He didn't even know who it is. As we're going to see here in a few verses, he meets Samuel face to face, doesn't even realize he's Samuel. Right, so he has no idea who he is, even though all of Israel would have. Saul's just ignorant of these things. But Saul also, in this, he's failing to seek divine help for life's trials. This is, again, is a common theme in Saul's life. Think about what happens with David and Goliath. What does David do when he meets Goliath? What does David do? Well, he stands up to Goliath because he says, you're not going to defy the army of the living God. And he, essentially prays to God and asks him for strength to go and fight him. He steps up in courage and says, God is stronger than this guy, while Saul is waiting there scared and terrified. Right? Saul doesn't think to seek, okay, well, let me seek God's help. Saul just is looking at this earthly problem and can't figure it out. Saul here is looking at this earthly problem of these donkeys going missing, can't figure it out, don't know what we're going to do. So his servant says, hey, there's a man of God here. Why don't we seek him? What he tells us comes true. Why don't we go see what he has to say? And Saul says, I didn't think about that. Who is this guy? Doesn't know who he is. Doesn't care to seek God's help for any kind of life's trials. Before we jump all over Saul, we might want to consider ourselves too. I think sometimes we do the same. I know I myself get there quite a bit. Something happens, something comes up, and I'm like, I've got to figure this out and handle this problem right now. And God's like, hey, you got to talk to me and get my opinion first? Yeah, I probably should, because you're right. Right? Sometimes we need to just stop and step back and just pray. Maybe read some scripture. See what God has to say about specific things first. Yet we try to go in and fix everything. And usually when we do that, we make a bigger mess. I know, at least I do. But Saul doesn't even seem to think about that. Saul also makes a very grievous error where he assumes that spiritual favors had to be bought. His main concern with not going there, obviously he's pushing back and saying, well, I don't even know if we can go. But his main concern, as we see in verses 7 and 8, is that he has no gift to bring to the prophet. He thinks that I have to go and give him some kind of bribe, pay him for this, give him something so that he will then go to God on our behalf. Tonight, when we go to prayer request time, y'all are going to have to give me $10 for every prayer that you guys want me to pray to God for you. Does that sound good? No? Okay, so I should charge more then. Right? That's exactly what he's thinking is going to happen. That's what it would look like today. That, okay, if you want me to pray for you, give me $50 and I'll say a special prayer to God for you for that situation. And that's how Saul is treating Samuel, that I have to bribe him, I have to give him something. Now, certainly there were leaders previously that were like that. But a true man of God does not demand any kind of gift or monetary gift or anything to go and minister and do some kind of spiritual duty for someone that they're supposed to love and care for in their community. A true man of God isn't going to say, well, I'm only going to pray for you if you give me money. Now, we have some people that are obviously on TV and have made very wealthy ministries that would beg to differ with me. but a true man of God does not charge to go to the throne of grace on your behalf. A true man of God does not require that you pay him extra or give him a gift to walk through a spiritual counseling situation or something with you. Saul is wrongfully assuming that this is what Samuel is going to do, but thankfully his servant is at least prepared, right? Because while Saul is like, I don't even know if I want to go see this guy. I don't even know who this guy is. Do we really need to do this? I don't have anything to give him. His servant's like, well, hey, you have no excuse because I have something to give him. So at least his servant is at least prepared. Maybe he kind of knew Saul, but at least he's prepared to go before him and be able to find some kind of answer. And then we have a weird verse in verse number 9 that just seems to be added in by the writer later of 1 Samuel to clarify what's about to happen in a few verses, because he lets us know that prophets were formerly called seers. And Saul agrees to go with his servant, right? So Saul agrees, okay, well, let's go seek this guy out. Again, to Saul doesn't even necessarily want to do this, so it seems kind of coincidental that they're going to do this. But again, look at how God's hand is working. Look with me in verse number 11. As they went up the hill to the city, they met young women coming out to draw water and said to them, "Is the seer here?" They answered, "He is. Behold, he is just ahead of you. Hurry. He has come just now to the city because the people have a sacrifice today on the high place. And as soon as you enter the city, you will find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat till he comes, since he must bless the sacrifice. Afterward, those who are invited will eat. Now go up, for you will meet him immediately." So they went up to the city, and as they were entering the city, they saw Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the high place. So verse number 11, they come into Ramah, and probably by the evening, because this is the evening sacrifice that they're about to do, and they have their meal. And they meet these young women who are following the custom of the day and greet these strangers, and they ask him about the seer. They ask him about the prophet, and they say, yeah, he's here. Hey, go see him. Verse number 12, since Samuel's also acting as a judge and a prophet, he's not always necessarily at Ramah. He would be making his way throughout the nation of Israel and judging and speaking on God's behalf as God would speak to him. So he's not necessarily always there. But it does seem that since the worship center at Shiloh has been destroyed by this point, that they had set up a sacred site, a sacred high place for him to offer sacrifices on there in his hometown. So that's what he's come back to do, is to do the sacrifice. And verse number 13 talks about this feast that they're going to have afterwards. This meal that is by invitation only, that he would invite people to come. One guy put it this way: as a respected elderly Levite, Samuel was given special recognition at the local religious observance, including the honor of pronouncing a blessing over the sacrifice, and the ritual would have been part of the evening sacrifice to be held at sundown. So he's not only having this feast, but he's also asked to give a blessing over the sacrifice as this elderly Levite, as this judge, as this prophet. So verse 14, they at least finally seemingly do something right. They follow this lady's advice to go find Samuel. And this is where the story gets interesting again in verse number 15. Because we start to see God's hand at work, and we start to see a little bit more about Saul. But verse number 15 says, now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, tomorrow, about this time, I will send to you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him to be prince over my people Israel. He shall save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I have seen my people, because their cry has come to me. When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said to him, here's the man of whom I spoke to you. He it is who shall restrain my people. Then Saul approached Samuel at the gate and said, tell me, where is the house of the seer? Saul doesn't even know who he is. He's talking to Samuel, doesn't even know who Samuel is, and he says, hey, can you tell me where this prophet guy is? Yeah, that's me, bud. Oh, okay, hi. Saul's completely ignorant again. But in verse number 15, none of this has happened by chance. That God has orchestrated all of this to happen so that Saul can be anointed as king, so that God will fulfill what he told them he would do. And the Lord reveals this to Samuel specifically and talks about their interaction. Verse number 17, he talks to Samuel And he sees Saul, and God says, that's it. That's the one I was telling you about. That's him. That's Saul. That's the one that you're going to anoint as prince over my people. And there's a word that God uses in there. In the ESV, it's translated as restrain. In the CSB, it's govern. And in others, it's govern. But that verb is actually very interesting when you look at it. Because the restrain is probably the better translation, because this verb translated there as govern can equally mean to restrain, to hold back, or to hinder, or even to imprison. The core meaning is to restrain or constrict, and the majority of its 46 occurrences in the Hebrew text, the word possesses a negative connotation, suggesting imprisonment, sterility, silencing, or holding back. In fact, this verse specifically is the only location in Scripture where the word can be taken to mean rule. By employing the verb here, the writer was suggesting that the Lord had determined to use Saul's career as a means of punishing the nation. That is specifically chosen to show that this wasn't God's desire, that this wasn't God's plan, and though he was going to grant and allow them to have what they desired, it was always going to be held over them as a punishment. That they had rejected God, they had rejected his kingship over them, and now he's going to remind them of that continually. Because indeed, the kings, especially as you go through and look at the history of Israel, they certainly did restrain or hold back or hinder the nation of Israel. Especially when they split the kingdoms up. The north kingdom didn't have a single good king. The south only had a handful. And it's continually a burden to the nation of Israel. But in those 3 verses there, I want you to go back and look at something that's repeated 4 times by God. If you underline or anything, I'd underline this. He says, my people, 4 different times as he talks to Samuel. He's constantly reminding them that they are still his people. That he still has a special care and desire for them. That they have left him. They have tried to reject him. They have tried to move on. But he's saying that even though you have rejected me, even though you've tried to push back, even though you want to separate from me, I still care about you. You are still my chosen people. That you are still my covenant people. That I still have a special plan and purpose. He's not relinquishing his claim on the nation of Israel. He's not saying that since you've chosen this king, I'm just going to hand you over and be done with you. He's reminding Samuel that I will still be present and I will still work through this earthly vessel that's going to be over you now. I will still work through him to protect and to take care of the nation of Israel, even though they have rejected me. God is so much more faithful to us than we are to him. And one of the things I'm humbled by most of the time is if God treated me the way that I treat him, what kind of relationship would we have? If he was as faithful and loyal to me as I was to him, if he was as ashamed and embarrassed of me as I am of him, boy, he should be. If he loved me to the extent that I love him, conditionally sometimes, where would we be? We would not have the same relationship that we do. Because Christ loves better than we can. Christ is more faithful than we are. And God cares more deeply about us and knows more about us than we will ever know about him this side of heaven. And yet God here is demonstrating that same love and care and affection for the nation of Israel that he has for each one of us today. Now, if you've put your faith and your trust in Christ, you may try to push back, you may try not to follow him, but the love of Christ still constrains you to keep you from going off and destroying your life completely and making a mess of it, to bring you back into the fold, to bring you into a right standing with him, to keep you faithful to him, to give you that desire to live holy as he is holy, that God still wants that close relationship with you. Look at verse number 18. This is Samuel's answer to Saul. He says, Samuel answered Saul, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for today you shall eat with me. And in the morning I'll let you go and will tell you all that is on your mind. As for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, do not set your mind on them, for they have been found. And for whom is all that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you and for all your father's house? Saul answered, Am I not a Benjaminite, from the least of the tribes of Israel? And is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me in this way? So Saul meets Samuel, and some of that's a little confusing, so we're going to break that down a little bit. But Saul meets Samuel, and he gets answers to things far more than he bargained for. He opens up, he says, Hey, are you the seer? He says, Yeah, guess what? You're going to come with me tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to tell you everything. Those donkeys you're looking for are found. Oh, and by the way, you're going to be the king of Israel. What? I was just coming to find out about some donkeys. And now all of a sudden life has changed. There's a few things that we see. Samuel invites Saul to attend the sacrifice with him and then to attend this lavish feast. That it was by invitation only. And not only is Saul invited, but he's invited to sit at the most prestigious place and at the place of honor at this feast. For some random stranger, that would be very uncommon and not something that would happen. So I'm sure everybody else that was there was probably like, who is this guy? Like, what is going on? How does he get this special place? And it would have probably been for Samuel, but Samuel is in humility, showing that he has deferred and submitted to God and his will. And he's allowing Saul to have this. Second, Samuel tells Saul that the donkeys have been found. You've been spending 3 days, they're found. He hadn't even asked him about that yet. How in the world does Samuel know this is what Saul is looking for? Well, God had already told him. Remember, this is God that's orchestrated all this. God allowed them to get lost. God allowed them to not be found. And God has brought him to Samuel specifically for this very moment. And he says, look, I know you're anxious and worried about that. Don't worry about it. They're found. They're taken care of. And now if you're like me, I'm probably sitting there like Saul, like, okay, so what was the whole point of me doing all this? I should have just come to you first. I guess I'll just go home now, right? And then he hits him with one last thing. He hits him with God's grand plan for the nation of Israel. That he is going to be chosen to be the leader, the earthly leader of the nation of Israel. That's a lot to digest in one little thing and say, okay, now come up to the sacrifice and eat with me. My mind would still be wrapped around it. Wait, what? I'm going to what? How? And this is kind of what Saul says. As he says in verse 21, whoa. Am I not a Benjaminite? Now you have to kind of understand and remember the history of his tribe specifically. They were not exactly a very well-respected tribe. If you go look at Judges 19 and 20, the tribe of Benjamin is almost completely broken up by a civil war, and they are definitely the least among the tribes of Israel, and they are a very sinful, wicked tribe, that they are not a very good tribe of Israel. Not only that, Saul's specific clan and his specific hometown of Gibeah, if you go back to Judges 19, verses 22 to 26, we're not going to look at it tonight, but you can go and read. It's the most heinous crime that was committed in Israel. And it happens by people that are most likely in some way related or have some kind of influence on Saul and his family. We can't say that they're directly related or anything. We don't know that. But it happened in the city that he is from, one of the most heinous crimes that has ever happened in the nation of Israel. And he says, this is me. How am I? How can this be? How can it be me that is going to be chosen? I do think there's some humility in Saul. I do think there's a lot of Saul just not wanting to do it. Which is weird because it does seem to be advantageous for Saul. And once he finally becomes king and actually gets a little taste of it, then he wants all the power. Then he wants all the wealth. Then he wants all the personal advantages without seeking God at all. But he's confused. And Samuel then shows Saul what it means to truly be a leader in verse number 22. Samuel took Saul and his young man and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited, who were about 30 persons. And Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion I gave you, of which I said to you, put it aside. So the cook took up the leg and what was on it and set them before Saul. And Samuel said, see, what was kept is set before you. Eat, because it was kept for you until the hour appointed, that you might eat with the guests. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. And when they came down from the high place into the city, a bed was spread for Saul on the roof, and he lay down to sleep. Samuel shows him what it means to be a truly humble leader. That he recognizes that Saul is the one that's been chosen to be king. And so Samuel, in an act of humility, is going to not only set Saul up at the head of the table in this prestigious manner, but he's given him the best portion of the meat. That he has given him the choice portion and said, you know what, you are the king, you are the future ruler, you have the best in his own house, in this lavish feast that every other person has been invited to that doesn't get that. He sets this aside specifically for Saul in humility, not taking it for himself, but in an act to show Saul what true humility and leadership looks like. Saul apparently doesn't get the message later on, by the way. But he does this in an act of humility. And then he goes to bed and he gives them what is probably the best room. You have to remember where they were in Israel. It's a dry, arid country. It's hot. The roofs were flat. They weren't like what we have. So it probably would have been the best place for him to sleep. And so now Samuel has even given him the best place to sleep and rest that night. And he wakes him up in the morning in verse number 26. It says, then at the break of dawn, Samuel called to Saul on the roof, up, that I may send you on your way. So Saul arose, and both he and Samuel went out into the street. As they were going down to the outskirts of the city, Samuel said to Saul, tell the servant to pass on before us. And when he has passed on, stop here yourself for a while, that I may make known to you the word of God. Then Samuel took a flask of oil and poured it on his head and kissed him and said, has not the Lord anointed you to be prince over his people Israel? And you shall reign over the people of the Lord, and you will save them from the hand of their surrounding enemies. And this shall be the sign to you that the Lord has anointed you to be prince over his heritage. So what does Samuel do? What? He did what God told him to do. He anoints him as king. In a private ceremony, he sends the servants off, and he takes Saul privately, and he says, this is what God's plan is for you. That you are going to be made a ruler over the nation of Israel. You are not only going to be a leader for them, but God is going to be with you and use you to give them peace and protection from their enemies around them. He's going to use them in a mighty way, it seems. That Saul is going to be this leader that gives them some form of safety around them. That they'll be saved from the hand of the enemies that were around them. And that God has chosen you for this. You may not understand it. You may not fully agree. You may not know why. But God has chosen you to do this. And here's the sign. We are going to anoint you as king with oil today. I don't want us to miss this, though. Even though the nation of Israel has rejected God as their king, they're not following his plan that he set out for them, he still cares for the nation of Israel and desires them to be safe. That one of the key things that Saul is going to do is save them from their enemies. That is what he's going to use Saul to do. Even though this new office that's kind of been established for the nation of Israel is not part of God's initial plan, is not God's desire for the nation of Israel, that God is still able to use this earthly plan, this fallible person, this fallible leader. God is still able to use it for his good. And he is still able to provide safety and protection for the nation of Israel. Even though they did not desire that. They didn't desire to have that relationship with God. They didn't desire to recognize him as king. They desired to have somebody just like all the other nations over them. But God, as we saw there in verses 15 to 17, was constantly reminding them, you are my people. We, the church today, the believers in Christ, are God's people. that God has a special purpose for us to reach the world with the gospel. That God will protect us. He tells us in the Gospels that the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. It's not every individual church, but that is the church as a whole. And that God will use us in a special way if we will remain faithful to God and do what he has called us to do. Imagine what would happen. He's able to use us when we mess up. He's able to grasp back in our mistakes somehow to still use everything for good in the end. Imagine if we would just step out and be faithful, be a little uncomfortable, be a little inconvenient, be inconvenienced for the gospel some. Imagine what God would be able to do through us then if we were just saying, God, however you will, use me. Whatever you'll do here through Forest Hills, use us. It may not look like how we think it will. It may not look like the church we think it will look like. But it'll be the one that will reflect God's glory. And that's what we should desire. Does anybody have any questions or any comments?
I was reading earlier. It was interesting because it said, you asked what you see about Saul.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you don't see is a mention of God.
Mm.
And then later on in Samuel,
Yeah, Samuel was definitely faithful. Anything else? All right, well, we're going to say goodbye to Facebook and those that were watching us. We're going to go ahead and transition into a time of prayer and see what we can be praying about for our church family. We'll break out into our groups here in just a moment.